right? I'm just cool. So guys, I just gonna give you a quick brief about what exactly we're gonna talk about. We're gonna talk about the growth, and we're gonna talk about the scalability of the product, which is very, very important for a product manager. And today we have a very, very humble and very hustler guest with us, Prachi Tiwari. She's currently working with Airbase as a product manager, and she's, I can vouch for her, and she's a kick-ass product manager, right? And she's going to be sharing her own insights, and also you guys can ask questions, or maybe if you have any query, just let us know, and we are more than happy to help you, right? So yeah, Prachi, handing over the session to you.
Yep. So I'll quickly give you guys like a brief of my journey so far and the kind of experience that I've had. The main reason why I want to do that is because I know that there's, of course, like a lot of material available online to be read and to be understood. But I feel that really the value that I can bring in is talk about my own experiences and what I've faced, the mistakes that I've probably made, and the lessons that I've learned while building products or while working on the growth aspect of products. And that ways that can be more valuable to you versus me only talking about things hypothetically, right? So I started out as a business analyst working for an HR IT company. So I was building a reporting module for and a benefits administration system. For those who don't know, in US, there's a law that if you have 50 or more employees, then you have to provide benefits or insurances to them. So a system on which the employees can enroll into those benefits, and then the reports get generated, and then you can generate bills which get sent out to carriers. Carriers in this case are insurance providers like Aetna, Delta, and I'm talking with respect to US, right? So a system, an end-to-end system on which you can do all of that is basically a benefits admin system. So I built the reporting aspect of it end-to-end, was in US for over a year, working directly with the clients doing that. And then that product got acquired by a broker. From there, I moved to building an end-to-end HR management system. So an end-to-end HR management system includes things like onboarding, comp management, performance management, things like these. So I was working on performance management and reporting aspect of it again. And from there, I moved to a completely new domain in a new organization called Sportstack. So we were building a business management system for real estate teams, right? So again, describing a market a little, in US, the trends are such that you will have individual real estate agents who are licensed agents. And as trend, they come together to form teams, right? So these teams or these team owners were the end buyer of our product. And the use case really was that, let's say today this team sends 10 homes. How can we enable this team to sell 15 or 20 homes, right? So, and we were highly leveraging data science and analytics. So we had a full-fledged data science team that worked on identifying trends on their data and then identifying what are the problems with their business, right? So to give you a couple of examples, we can say that, okay, there are agents who aren't converting as much in a certain team. So what are the coaching points for those agents? What can we really help those agents learn? Or probably there are different lead sources that these teams buy leads from, and leads are people who want to buy homes, right? So how can we enable them to have better conversions from a specific lead source, right? Which lead source should they invest more money in? Which lead source should they invest lesser money in? Things like these. So we utilize data science, and then through our analytics product help surface this data to help them identify these trends. So did that, and that was like a completely different new product in the sense that we had a completely different business model. And when COVID hit, we had to completely pivot. So that sense had experience building that product from scratch. So we did a couple of design sprints, did market research, went into beta, came out of beta, and then achieved product market fit, right? So that was like the whole journey of 0 to 1, and the most important journey of my 0 to 1 product building. And then from there, I moved to Airbase, where I am right now. So at Airbase, we have an end-to-end spend management system. So think of it that any spend that a company has, which is a non-payroll expense, which means any money that they spend, which is not paying salaries to their employees, flows through our system. So it's targeted at mid-market companies, at SMBs and early enterprises. And we offer like end-to-end management system. For example, we have virtual cards, we have physical cards on our system. You can make check payments, ACH transfers, and things like those. And the target market again is US. So that's pretty much what my experience has been. Cool. Should I like move on to the main agenda and the presentation itself, Ritik?
Sure. Why not, Prachi? And guys, if you could just open your webcam also, right? It's gonna look nice to us because training the people in black screens is very boring, right? So yeah, Prachi, you can just go ahead.
Cool. So again, I know that we will be focused on the growth and virality aspect of it, but I do want to cover substantially, what is 0 to 1 products and what goes into building 0 to 1 products, and what have been my lessons from building 0 to 1 products, right? And once we have the baseline established for that, then any questions you have around the growth aspect of it, I can cover that. Sorry. Cool. So I know that you guys must have heard this term 0 to 1 a lot. And I know that somebody in the introduction also mentioned, right, that they have experience building in a 0 to 1 product. So what does 0 to 1 even mean, right? And where did this term really come from? So 0 to 1 in itself is really the process where you create something that doesn't already exist. And you work on intensive growth of the product, right? So you create something new, you figure out the use case for it, what is the problem that you're trying to solve, and you're essentially creating a new market category of sorts where you're defining a problem statement and what goes into the product to solve that problem statement, right? Anything which is 1 to 10 or 1 to 100 will be more of an extensive growth where you will say that, okay, now I have a well-defined problem. I know what kind of users want this problem to get solved for them. And I know what is the baseline product to solve this problem. Now, how can I really make it grow is more of like a 1 to 10 or a 1 to 100 problem, right? Where did the term 0 to 1 really come from, right? So for anybody who has seen the famous video of the PayPal Mafia and who knows Peter Thiel, right, or is inspired from him. So the term was actually coined by him, and it's also a very famous book that he wrote, which was about encouraging 0 to 1 behavior, right? So in that specific book, he talks about that most people are inclined towards building things 1 to n, or they are more inclined towards building things or solving problems which are more like competitive problems where the problem, that the problem exists, that there are some competitors that are already in the market, and which is why they choose to do it because it's an established problem. But building something 0 to 1 is a whole new challenge in itself, or a whole new problem in itself, right? And because it is more difficult, there are fewer people who are actually inclined towards doing it. So in the book, he also mentions that, any sort of progress that happens or any sort of substantial change that you bring in comes in from monopoly, right? And not from competition. What he's trying to say is that if you are picking a new problem that hasn't been solved before, or if you're figuring out a new way to solve a certain problem that nobody has been able to solve, then you are not just creating a successful business or a business category or a market category, but you're also ensuring the progress of the society and bringing about that substantial change in the world, right? I know that somebody did talk about that, how much they love solving problems, right? So that's one thing that I would really want to mention, that as a PM, I don't know if there's any other skill that you can attribute to being a successful PM as much as you can attribute it to the love of solving problems, right? To the love of actually understanding what is the pain point of your customer, what do they want to get done that today they are not able to get done, right? And then creating, or the what aspect of it is a secondary aspect, right? You can of course create or start from a very bad product and then evolve to like a much more valuable product, or evolve to a much more substantial market use case. But really understanding the problem that you're willing to solve is basically the core or the fundamental of it, right? So that is what he actually says, that if you do something that hasn't been done before and you do it better than anybody else, right, then that's when you create a monopoly, and that's where 0 to 1 really comes into play. Typically 0 to 1 now is actually also used very interchangeably, not just when you're creating something new, right? It is also used when you're sort of creating a business category, in the sense you're solving or you're creating a problem for a market that hasn't been very demanding of their needs, for a need that hasn't been solved before, or when you're trying to build something from scratch, right? So a lot of times you will see people using this term a lot when they're not really creating something new, So also like important to mention that, right? Any questions so far on 0 to 1 aspect of it, really? Cool. I'm sorry, I think my internet is slightly lagging. I just stopped sharing 1 second. Cool. So now you've asked what are the associated challenges, right? When you actually go ahead in building a 0 to 1 product, why is it that Peter Thiel mentions that it is relatively difficult, right? And why is it that people are hesitant on actually starting a 0 to 1 journey? So have listed some of associated challenges here. And of course, I think it could be something that will be interesting for us to discuss what all you guys think can be additional associated challenges, right? So number one, of course, is the lack of data, right? Given that this problem hasn't been solved before, given that this market category doesn't already exist, how do you get the data to validate a hypothesis that you might already have, right? Something that you're going to learn in a lot of these PM courses or in talks is that you should always have some hypothesis in place, and then you should always utilize data to validate that hypothesis or to understand how much sense does it make in the real sense or in the real world. But when you have a lack of data, when it is a problem that hasn't been solved before, how do you even get the right data to validate anything? That's number one, right? Number two, you could have like a limited and no understanding of the market, right? Given that it could be a new market that you're foraying into, it could be that this market hasn't seen a solving of that problem already, right? And you don't know what are the different kind of user behaviors that you're going to see in this market. Now, another associated point that I want to mention with this is that why am I assuming that you're going to start from one specific market, right? And why am I not talking in the general sense of the world? So always important to remember that when you build something from scratch or when you solve a problem, it is important to be something to someone than be something to everyone, right? Because that way you will end up becoming nothing to anyone, right? So if you are not starting from a niche audience, if you're not starting from a niche market, if you're not identifying what is the kind of user and market that you're trying to solve this problem for, you might end up solving a problem that nobody even wants solved in the first place. A lot of times people ask this question, right? And really two ways to look at it. So a lot of times when you are going to do a startup, right, or you're going to start a new problem, somebody will come to you, oh, but what makes you think that your product is better than what probably Facebook or Google can create tomorrow, right? Or how do you ensure that the Facebooks of the world or the monopolies of the world cannot create this? Honestly, they can, right? They have the money, they might have the tech team in place, but are they even focused on solving that problem? Probably not, right? Even if tomorrow, let's say you start or you foray into tech to start solving a new problem, and Facebook says that, okay, this seems like an interesting market for us to enter or an interesting problem for us to solve, they're going to only start from, say, like a 6 people team, which will be more of an experimental team to start working on that problem, right? And that too will never become their focus area because they are focused on so many problems. The advantage that smaller businesses, that startups have, is that they are completely focused on one problem, on one market area, and solving the problem for their target users, right? And whatever resources that they have available, they're actually employing all of those resources to work on that problem. So that focus is your core value proposition, and not the associated money that comes with it, or not the associated technical expertise, right? Of course, all of it is an element to making something successful, but that's one important thing to understand, right? The reverse of this could also be true, right? Sometimes you will see that as long as people start seeing early indicators that, oh, I have created something which is valuable in the industry, they try to expand too soon, right? And that's also a mistake in itself, because because imagine this, right? A 10 people company, and specifically a B2B example, a company that has 10 employees and a company that has 100 employees will have completely different needs, right? the needs in terms of how you are going to onboard those users, the needs in terms of how are they going to train their employees to use your product, the need in terms of how long will it take for them to implement, the needs in terms of how much cost are they willing to associate or pay for your product, right? And all of that is such a different problem statement for you to solve as a PM or as a product team, that if you try to solve for both kind of customers, you might not end up solving it for either one, right? So which is why building that understanding of the market, understanding what is the customer base that you're focusing on becomes so important, right? The third is barriers to change in user behavior. Now, this is, of course, when you're trying to create a new market category. In that sense, you know that the problem exists, and probably your user also identifies, or your customer also identifies that the problem exists. But let's say today they solve that problem via Excel, right? Now, if any of you has read this book called Hooked, right? It talks about how your product has to be at least 6 times better for somebody to switch from their existing product to your product, right? It's not that you create a product that you will say is marginally better or incrementally better than what already exists in the market, and your user is going to make that shift, right? Let's say, and today, by the way, the world still runs on Excel, right? It still runs on Google Sheet. So if you're introducing a product that is built to replace that is saying that, look, my product is a smarter way of doing this, it has to improve user experience to an extent, it has to solve problems to an extent that it is, the perceived value of it is at least 6 times, 7 times, 10 times better than what the user already gets. And that's when they're going to make that shift of starting to use your product, right? I'm not even talking about coming back to your product or the retention aspect of it. I'm just talking about getting your user to start using your product in the first place, right? And that becomes a very important aspect. So, and a lot of users actually tend to undermine this. They're like, oh, but today you can do this by doing X, but here I'm with Y, which is better. But how better, right? Or how much better is it actually from their existing solution is like an important question that you need to ask. The next is constrained resources. Now, safe to assume, unless you've had multiple startups, so you already have a team in place, there are going to be a lot of chances where you are constrained on the money that you can invest in the problem in terms of the resources, in terms of the tech resources, in terms of sales, marketing, etc. Right? So those constrained resources is another associated challenge. And then, of course, you have no users or customers at this point, right? So really identifying what users and how to get your first set of users. And there are examples that I will also discuss, ways that companies have used to get their first set of users, or what you call as the shareability or the virality aspect of the product, right? So all of these are associated challenges. Any questions or anything that anybody would want to discuss?
Yeah, I just have one. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Please.
Yeah, so my question was like, as you mentioned that Hooked also mentions that in order to change people's habit to move from one product to another, the product needs to be 9 times better than that product. So when we are building a product as a newcomer, how do we deliver the value proposition, or how do we benchmark that this product needs to be, let's say, 9 times better than the existing one? So firstly, how we would benchmark, and secondly, how we would deliver the value proposition.
Right. So in cases like this, right, and your question is like absolutely correct. How do I even, as an internal audience, define that my product is 9 times better, right? And don't you think better is more of like a comparative metric versus like an absolute metric? Because there's no definition of better per se, right? So typically it has to be a combination of multiple factors, right? Number one, when you start to define better, you have to have like a better definition of the problem statement in itself, right? So understanding that where are the challenges that lie with them using Excel. Let's take a simple example of, let's say you have like a spend management system also, right? Or simply a system on which you maintain all of your expenses, right? A budgeting system. And today somebody does that budgeting via Excel, right? Number one aspect is what reminds them to come to Excel, right? Of course, somebody would remember that they have to use Google Sheets or Excel when probably they make a spend, or when they get money from somewhere. That's their trigger point, right? To understand that, okay, now that I have to go to Excel and now I have to go to Google Sheet to register this action, right? So how does your user, what emotion invokes in your user, and what are those scenarios that invoke those emotions, right? Number two, when they go to Excel and let's say they enter a wrong value, right? Is there any sort of prompt that they will get that the value that they entered is incorrect or does not make sense or does not fit in? Probably not, right? All of your budgeting will work accordingly, right? Number three, when let's say it's a new month, when it's a new year, a new financial year, will the experience of Excel or Google Sheet in itself improve? No, right? The fourth aspect of it could be, let's say somebody wants to just look at their profit and loss for a certain year or a certain month, right? There is no auto calculate that's happening there, right? You have to be smart enough to create that UI for yourself. You have to be smarter to say that, okay, somebody as a user, I might want to see my profit for a certain month or a year. As a user, I might want to track that, okay, let's say today or this month I spent 10,000 on fuel. Have I ever spent more than 10,000 on fuel ever in my life? Is it the first time that my expenses on fuel have gone that high, right? So maybe marking discrepancies like these, right? So a few examples, right? Now, all of these contribute to the value that you can bring in through creating that product, right? In terms of that intrinsic trigger, you can say that, okay, every time I know that a card purchase is made, I can maybe trigger a notification to say, oh, looks like you made a spend on your card. Do you want to register it to your expense management tool, right? Or you can say that every time you receive or there's an inbound, right? Or you have a bank notification. But there could be multiple internal triggers that you can build or external triggers that you can build, right? In form of push notifications, in form of email notifications, or maybe as user behavior, you notice that somebody does that only during the beginning of the month, right? So now you know that every time this person receives their salary on first, they come to your product and they begin to create that expense chart. So what you now do is that first of every month, you send them an email. Oh, by the way, you haven't created or updated your expense this month, right? So that becomes now you go ahead and you understand the problems that what all do people like to track, and you can create that tracking or you can have that reporting available within your product, right? So every time you solve one aspect of every problem that your user faces, that's you making a better product than what already exists, right? I'm not going to say that there's a right answer to say, okay, at what point do I say now my product is 9 times better, right? And now I can take it to market. But really understanding and talking to a lot of customers, right? Showing them prototypes, doing usability tests to see, okay, does it solve your problem? Or and the best way really to do usability test is to not walk your user through the product, right? Just give them the product and say, oh, do you like what you see? What all do you think can you do from the product or the mocks or the screens that you're able to see right now, right? Does it solve any existing problem that you already have, right? So asking questions like these, and then from those questions, you can do some sort of rating, ranking, marking, right? You can create an internal system of your own to say, okay, if I get a check in 9 of these areas, then I can say that my product is X times better, right? So that's more like and there are of course frameworks available to do that also, but then you can have more of an internal system. But the idea really is the intrinsic value and how many such challenges in the whole workflow can you solve, right? Versus only solving for like the end value that you're delivering.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
I guess, Prachi, when you talk about a sales lead product versus a product lead product, right? So when you talk about sales lead product, there is always be like in EdTech also right now we are working, right? So it's more about the sales team they're working on, right? It's more about how they hook the customer, how they much like again generate more revenue, again generate more money, right? And that's how we as a founder, we always see like, okay, now we have done X amount of, or maybe we have captured this number of users, and now people are using a product. Maybe now we have more better product than versus some other company, right? So how you differentiate between the sales lead product versus a product lead product in terms of betterment?
Right. Right.
Because
So
ultimately when we talks about edtech, right? So edtech, it's mostly about uh, like capturing more users and getting more users on the platform, right? It's not just about getting the revenue, right? So in that case, how you differentiate that?
right. So I'll actually answer this a little differently, right? And specifically when we talk to 0 to 1 product, right? A 0 to 1 product, and very rarely will you see the strategy is really to build like a sales-led product, right? Because essentially that will never be the goal, right? Essentially the goal for 0 to 1 product is always to identify a problem and market and really solve that problem really well for your target market or your target customers, right? So that aspect really does not come into play, or shouldn't rather come into play when you're building 0 to 1 product, except when your use case is rather different, right? And you will say that, okay, there needs to be like sort of a sales-led growth here, or I need like a very sales-driven team or a sales-driven product from day one, right? And probably I will say that you should, in retrospect, go back and ask that question to yourself, that if I need a 10 people sales team to sell my product from day one, or even to acquire my first set of customers, then even am I solving the right problem also, exactly, right? So that is like the half aspect of it and the number one aspect of it. Number two, how are these different, right? And I wouldn't say that they're of course sales and product like are completely different, right? But there are definitely some overlaps between marketing led and product
led growth, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So marketing led. So look at it like a funnel, right? And every problem in the world can be basically drawn down to a funnel.
Right.
So, right. So you get some input, right? And that input is the initial set of customers that you acquire. And then you can optimize for every stage of the funnel, right? You can say, now that I've acquired a customer, how do I get them, or how do I activate that customers, right? So acquisition, then there's activation, right? And what is activation for everyone here? That let's say you started using Facebook, right? Now, how does Facebook know that you're activated as a user? Let's say you added seven friends. Yes, perfect. Let's say you're using Instagram. So Instagram could have an internal metric to say that they assume you to be an activated user. Let's say once you post 2 photos and let's say 1 story on their platform, right? So you acquire a user, then you activate a user, and then you retain a user, right? And of course, the retention can also be broken down into several other things. So you can, so when you're talking about marketing, right? Marketing basically will work till the acquisition and the activation aspect of it, right? And they will really say that, okay, because you're marketing the product good enough, you're able to get more users or new users.
Exactly.
And then you're able to activate them because, our marketing helps people understand how to set themselves up on the product, how to start using the product, right? But then product-led growth essentially ensures that you're able to retain your users within the product itself, right? By consistently showing them the value that you're delivering throughout the product itself.
Correct.
So those are the major differences that I will say is
amazing. Got it. Thank you so much, Prachi. So right now we are just doing the same thing, right? So we were at a sales lead product. Now we just want to get into the product led product, right? So exactly, that's the same thing we are doing. Thank you so much, Prachi.
Cool. I think my Zoom has some issue and I can't change the slide when I'm screen sharing, which is weird.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So yes, what are the stages involved in building 0 to 1 product? And I think, so how much time do we want to keep for questions so that?
So Prachi, we will be taking 15 minutes, right, for the questions, right? So yeah.
Okay, then I'll go through like a little bit quickly than I had intended through those slides. And then if anybody has any questions, they can let me know. Cool. So what are the stages involved in building a 0 to 1 product, right? That you define your people outcomes and build an MVP. Now, again, I will not go into the depth of building an MVP because that I think is like a separate session in itself. But most importantly, I think from really being that an MVP means a minimum viable product. Now people call it a minimum valuable, and sometimes it is also called an MLP or a minimum lovable product. What that essentially means, and as a very simple example, is that you're opening a pizza shop, right? Now you say that I'm going to start serving, and instead an MVP, when you're defining an MVP, you can say that, okay, I'm going to offer only one type of pizza, right? Instead of having like 16 different categories, because I want to understand whether there's even a need for pizza in this market or not, or even people are going to buy pizza from me or not, right? Now, if your MVP in some way means serving a burnt pizza to your customers, that is never going to help you understand the need of the market itself, right? Or let's say it's a tasteless pizza that you're really delivering to your customers. Very similarly, and that's what a lot of people took from MVPs, right? They said, okay, we need to build like a very, very viable version of whatever we can put out there and really understand. But it is not enough to just solve a problem, and UI cannot be a compromise when you are building an MVP. That's what essentially a minimum valuable or a minimum lovable product means, right? It means that you have to reduce the scope of the product such that it solves a very definitive problem. But at the same time, you have to solve it really well through the product, right? You cannot really, you really cannot give up on customer experience or the value that you're providing to your customers, right? So answering these questions, that what is the value that our user is really looking for and what value can be successfully delivered to our customers, becomes important in the stage one of really building like a 0 to 1 product.
Are you still facing the problem, Prachi?
Yeah.
So you can do one thing, you can just reshare it, right?
Yeah. Cool. So yes, how to build an MVP, right? So there are various steps again, and like I said, it has to be a separate section of itself, because, but if I were to quickly list down the steps, right, and what are my takeaways from really the MVP, is not that it is not like one product or a variation of something that already exists, right? It has to provide a value, it has to solve a definitive problem, right? And MVP means iterating too much and too quickly, right? What that means is that as soon as you're able to learn from the product that you have built that it is not solving the problem, or it is not solving the problem in the right manner, you have to iterate really quickly and to help your users understand and learn from that, right? So you have to define the why and the what and the value before you really build the product. You have to gather patterns from the users that you talk to, right? And really, there is nothing more important to an MVP than actually going out there and talking to your customers and getting their real-time feedback, right? Understanding of what is it that your user does today to solve that problem is very important, right? So a lot of times you will say that, okay, there are people who say, oh, this looks like a great problem to solve, right? And we think that it can turn into like a monetization strategy for us. We can build a great business out of it, right? And let's, for an example, just take this PM course, right? Or a cohort, right? So unless you have an understanding of what people like you do today when they want to learn or when they want to get into PM, right? Or when they want to change path of careers, you will never be able to essentially solve this problem well for the users that are here, right? You are essentially able to conduct these lectures to deliver these things because you understand that the challenge that the users face today is that they don't get that. Probably they might have access to a lot of content, but they don't know how to streamline the efforts towards that content, right? Or that they have a lot of different material that they can go through, but they don't have enough real life examples, right? Or real life mentorship or coaching that they can go through to make that switch of careers, right? So just saying that we are going to do X to solve a problem is not enough. You have to understand that what is your user doing today to solve that problem, right? And that's where the concept of better comes from, because unless you have an understanding of what they do today, you can't say that whatever you're building is better than what they already do. Then you would obviously want to list down the features that you would want to build, and that's where the what aspect comes through. By far, we've only talked about the why, right? As to why do you want to solve, build this product? What is the problem that you're trying to solve, right? But what will you really build to get that problem solved? And then iterating quickly on your what is basically what an MVP is about. And then, of course, because it is M, right? It is minimum. So understanding and identifying that set of minimum feature set that you can deliver through the resources that you might have available in the time that you might have available becomes like the next step. I'm sorry, this is embarrassing.
No worries, Prachi. That's totally okay. I guess there's a technical glitch in Zoom, right? So no worries. Let's do one thing. Let me try one thing for you, right? So I'm just hitting the share screen option again, right? And just share now. Like again, just share it again. I guess it's gonna help you. I guess. Now try to change your slide.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
I just have one question, if I can go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as you mentioned that it's very important to target what the users want at that point of stage. So let's say that we are building a MVP around a problem, and we are targeting the problem that the users were facing at that point of time. But during the course to build the product, let's say we had a sprint of 6 months, and the product is now complete, but the user's problem has actually shifted from what they were facing. Actually, the cohort of users that we were targeting now have a different problem. So how do we tackle that situation?
Right, great question, right? And again, I'm sorry, but I will always answer this in, again, two parts, right? Because there are two different questions that I see you've asked, right? So number one, when you say that the problem of the users has shifted, right, changed, or that they might have new problems, essentially a user will always have too many problems, right? And again, let's just assume that today, a new chocolate company, a company making a new chocolate, right? And they come to me and they say, oh, what do you not like about the chocolates today, right? Probably I don't like the thickness of it. I don't like the consistency of it. I might think it's too sour. I might think it's too bitter for my taste. I might think that there are chocolates that are available outside India that we don't get, in India. I might think that there are different alcohol flavored chocolates that you can get in Europe, but you don't get as much in India, right? I could have multiple problems, right? As a product team or as somebody who's building a new product, you always will have a set of problems, and then you have to stack rank those problems, right? And you will have to say that, okay, which is the most important problem that I want to solve today? It doesn't mean that tomorrow you can't expand your set to also solve the next three problems, right? And that you can't diversify your product to also solve the other problems. But in a sense, today you would want to identify the top problem that you want to solve, right? That really comes to identifying that your users will always have multiple problems. But as a PM, your job is number one, to identify all of these problems, right? To get validation on all of these problems. And then also to understand which of these are you going to prioritize, right? Which is the prioritization aspect of it. Prioritization is not only for product features. It doesn't mean that I'm going to build search before I'm going to build notifications. It means that search helps them search through the different things that are available in my product, and notification builds this internal and external trigger to bring users back to my product. Today, is it important for the users to be able to use my product effectively, or is it important for me to bring them to my product? And because you're solving one problem above the other, you decide what features have to be built accordingly, right? So that's like the first aspect. Now, why I also think this is a great question is because user needs also change, right? Now, as an example, let's say today a new social networking site comes into play, right? When yesterday Facebook or when a few years before Facebook came into play, and they said, look, today you can add friends through my through this platform, right? Or you can look at people's feed from this platform. You were like, oh my god, this is great, right? I can now connect to my friends. I can now talk to people that I haven't talked to in years, right? And that was the wow factor for you, right? And that was the true value that it was delivering at that point of time. Today, if a social media comes into play and says, oh, hey, Parth, you know what? You can, contact your friends and connect with your friends through my platform. You'll be like, okay, cool, right? I mean, that's the least that I expect out of a social networking system, if anything, right? So user needs also evolve over time. It's not just the problems, right? So today, something that you can be like a wow factor for, or something that your user looks at, a great feature, right, at your product, can tomorrow become the most essential thing that they might need, right? So if you look at this graph, there are features, that today when you provide to your users. Now, as an example, let's say you are in a business where, again, let's take like a spend management system, right? And there are four, you were the first one to build it. Now, today you already have three competitors, right? If as this product, you say, okay, I'm going to build a search where you can search by spend of any category, right? Which means you can say, okay, food and movies, right? And by expense, you can then look at all the expenses that you made. That, and then as soon as you introduce that feature, it could be a delighter feature for your audience, right? And then you can go to market and say, look, I offered this today as a spend management system, which is not available on any other spend management systems, right? But tomorrow, if your competitor also introduces the same search, it's not a delighter feature for the audience anymore, right? They'll be like, oh, but it is already available, right? So that is when the user needs begin to evolve, and there's a certain sort of behavior. Today, you will not use, let's say, an e-commerce website that does not have filtration, right? But the first time an e-commerce website introduced sorting by price or filtration, that was a wow feature, right? So that's how not just user problems, but also user needs evolve with time. And as a PM, it is important that you keep defining that, okay, today, when you are introducing a feature, is it like a must-have? Is it like a delighter? Is it a game changer, right? So all of those things need to be identified.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Oh, it's stuck again. I don't think it worked.
I don't know then. I was only having this solution, right? I guess maybe there's problem in Zoom only.
I think someone else can try sharing the screen if possible.
Cool. Oh no, there are only a couple of slides left. I think we should be good. Next is the growth aspect of it. And again, who do you think are the next 1,000 users that you can target, right? Who are the people who are not using your product that you think can start using your product? This is the same thing that I've talked about earlier, where there is some level of overlap between marketing and growth, and product-led growth essentially will look through all of these different factors, right? And one example of product-led growth, and again, it's a term that you're going to see or hear a lot, is the virality that the product intends to build via the freemium model, for example, right? So you will say that today I just want to acquire my first set of users. So I'm going to give them all of these for free. And then there are going to be some features that are going to be paid for, right? And something that you can only do if you are on let's say, a premium suite or a model, right? So in that case, the freemium model ensures that you're able to get your first set of users. And as they begin to find value in your product, as they begin to understand what are the needs that the product is solving for, you can, of course, expand your user base, right? And growth, again, would appreciate if you guys have any specific questions on growth, because it is a very big topic to be covered again and requires a section of itself. Really, the last thing that I want to cover, is my mistakes, right, in building 0 to 1 product with specific examples, and what have I learned out of it. So number one is making assumptions and not validating with enough users, right? Now, to give you an example, we started out, as, and like I said, in my previous organization, we had a well-built data science team, right? And we integrated with the customer's CRM. Anybody who doesn't understand CRM, it's like a system where you have all of your leads, you can update their status, maintain their current status, right? Of the leads or the people that you're selling home to in this case, right? A lead could be anything. For a net tech platform, it will be people who want to get educated or buy a course, right? So we used to integrate with the CRMs, and we worked as a tech layer on top of that CRM to identify opportunities, right? And to say that, okay, look, here's a lead that you haven't been able to convert. We can come in, find factors as to how you can, convert a certain leads, identify the topmost leads that we think have the most potential to close, send them back to you, right? And that was like the whole model. So we made an assumption that once we do that, and once we send the lead back, the customer will immediately identify the value and say, oh, by the way, you sent this lead, it's a great lead, right? And it did close for me. On the other hand, what started happening was that the customers started feeling, or specifically the users, right? And there's always going to be a distinction between a customer and a user. A customer in a B2B space is going to be somebody who pays for your product. A user is going to be somebody who uses the product, right? In case of EdTech, a customer is the parent, right? Convincing them that this is the right platform for your child. The user is really the child, right? And you might want to, as a PM, and there would be always different PMs focused on different aspects of it, right? A PM that focuses on the customer's experience, a PM that focuses on the user experience, right? So we assume that once the customer really plugs our platform or plugs our tool, once we send those leads back to the users, they'll be rather thankful and happy about it, right? But that didn't happen. They sort of felt that we were encroaching in their space, and that, those were the leads that they were anyway already working on. So why is like a third party coming into their system and telling them, look, here's a lead that you need to work on, right? Even if it was through data science, right? So that ways we had to really update our positioning to say that, look, it is not humans who are identifying this lead, right? We think you're already great at your job. And we don't think that you're dropping leads because you're not great at what you do, but because we think that as a sales agent, you should focus on selling versus figuring out the opportunities in your CRM, right? And that's the time and energy that we can save you. So that repositioning helped us to really realize the end value in front of our customers, right? So the assumption that we started from was that as soon as we start sending leads back, people are going to find value in that lead and they're rather going to be happy about it. But the emotion at the receiving end was completely different, right? So making assumptions and not validating the users or not understanding how a certain thing makes them feel could be one mistake, right? And that was a mistake that I personally did and learned from, and that we had to reposition from, right? The next is not pivoting quickly when things go south, right? So a great example of this is that we were actually building a mobile app, right? And we said that this mobile app today is required because there are certain aspects of a user journey that are not solved as effectively today, right? Now, how can I help solve these challenges more effectively? If I have a better UI, if I have a new interface, right? I think people will come to the app. They would love to come to the app and solve and make calls from there, right? And get details there, right? On the other hand, what we ended up learning was getting the users to use a new interface, right? Was 80% of the challenge. Our challenge wasn't that after somebody came to the mobile app, their needs were not getting solved. The challenge was bringing them to the mobile app in the first place when they are also used to using web all the time, right? And that was the moment that we realized it, but we still kept making increments to the mobile app, assuming that after we provide initial value, users will start coming there, right? And which didn't go right? So maybe we could have pivoted a lot more quickly and said that, look, bringing the people to a new interface is a challenge, and I don't want to take that challenge on today. Let's make our web offering stronger today versus bringing people to mobile, right? Third is not looking at data frequently, right? Now, one of your questions that you could ask is that while you're building 0 to 1 product, you might not even have enough data, right? And wasn't this one of the challenges that we started with, right? So your data does not have to be limited to patterns that you can draw from, let's say, thousands of data points, right? Your data could also be users using your product and you just looking at full story or similar platforms to just see how was their session like, right? A recording of how did they interact with your product, right? Did they have any challenges while using your product? What was the place, let's say they were not able to find the search button at all, or they were not able to figure out how to press the back button, right? So all of these are also data points for you to improve your product, right? And it just doesn't need that, okay, my DAU is X, my WAU is Y, right? DAU is daily active users, WAU is weekly active users, right? So those don't just contribute as data points. What are the friction points that your users are encountering while using your product, right? How do they interact with different areas of your product? At what time do they come to your product, right? All of these could be data points for you as well. Underestimating users' friction to try new things, right? So that is also one important aspect that I also talked about early on, that assuming that, as soon as you have a product which is incrementally better than what already exists, users will be more than happy to try it out. And I'm not sure if you guys follow Shreyas Doshi or are aware of his tweets, but I would say that 50% of my product learnings come from him, right? And there's this great tweet that he wrote which says that when you start to build a product, you have to start from the assumption that the user does not care, does not know, does not feel the need for your product in the first place, right? The mistake that a lot of PMs do is that they assume too much. They assume that the user remembers your product, right? Think of it. There are so many times that, as a consumer, you will download an app and 1 week later, you will forget about its existence, right? But you will never go back to that app again, right? And this happens to so many products so frequently, right? And there could be reasons why somebody downloaded it. Maybe you were offering like a cashback, maybe you were offering some free coins to the user every time they downloaded it, right? But assuming that they're going to remember to come back to your product, that they're going to, the very first time that they use your app, they'll be like, oh wow, what has this guy created, right? Let me come back to it every day. That's not going to happen, right? And the step one to building a valuable product is to understand that these assumptions will not hold true in the real world, and the user will not understand the value of your product till you're able to deliver on that value consistently, right? So that's next. And then last, again, is contradictory to one of these points over, but listening to the users too much too often, right? And again, a great example of this is if you had asked people what they wanted when cars did not exist, they would have said faster horses, right? Users don't know what they want. They are going to be very, and this happened to us a lot of times, right? Where we would go back to users and users would be like, oh, but if your product had this, I would definitely find value in it and I would definitely use it. And you would just build it, right? And then you would see no improvement in the metrics at all, right? And you would go back and say, hey, you asked for this and we built it, right? Why are you still not using it? And they'd be like, oh, but do you know I also have this problem that you could solve for me? So really, not counting on it too much unless you see a pattern in that request, unless you see that it's a problem that a lot of your users in your market encounter, and not blindly trusting every feedback that you get and building as per that feedback is also important. So yeah, these I think would be my learnings, and that's pretty much it. Open for any questions that you guys might have.
Amazing, amazing. I guess, Prachi, it's my learning when you achieve product market fit, your acquisition and your everything goes like again, it's cost you high, right? Versus
Yep.
when you're into the 0 to 1 process. Amazing. So guys, if you have any questions, if you have any doubts, right, please feel free to ask. And yeah.
Yeah, I had a few more questions. So one thing was, as your product is a B2B product, so when you just came with that product, so you went with the freemium model or you charged some subscription for it? So this was
Right.
my, yeah.
So if you're asking what are the various ways to monetize, then there could be different ways. If you're asking about my specific use case, then what we did was that we charged a certain implementation fee, which was like a base fee for the first 6 months. And then we said that, okay, then you start paying like a subscription or a SaaS model, right? And you pay per month usage as per the number of users you have or as per the module-based pricing. The reason why we wanted to charge something and not start from freemium, and specifically why most B2Bs do not prefer to offer a product for free, is that the user will then not invest enough time, right? By if you're getting a product from free, you would almost take it too lightly and you'd be like, oh, hey, I mean, it's a free product, right? Why should I even care about it? So when they pay something, they're actually liable, accountable to come back to your product, to even encourage the internal users, because B2B products will always have internal champions, right? They will always have people who will come back and who will say that, okay, look, I am the one who's buying this product for my company, and they are going to be the ones who are going to voice out the challenges and say, okay, your product is not solving this, or I want you to onboard these many users to the product, right? So for those internal champions to be actually bought into your product, it's important that you charge them something, or you have like some sort of intrinsic value proposition built in there, right? Such that they have some incentive in utilizing that product and getting the users of their team to onboard it to your product. But then, of course, there could be different business model that could work for different teams. Freemium models work, but then most companies, B2B specifically products that offer freemium, you would see would only be for like a month or two, because a month or two is like enough to really idealize that value. Whereas in B2C, you will mostly see that the model will be more of like, you get base features for free, and then there's going to be some premium feature set as well.
So I guess asking some for some money, because we are actually getting a CRM, right? And they are charging like right now 500 rupees per month for a user.
Mhm.
And what they have offered me, they offered me the CRM at 300 rupees, and completely like again, I can use for n like n number of members, right? N number of like again, for my team, and it's for a month, right? So what they are doing is they're just asking me for a little bit amount, so I can actually can invest my time also in that. If it's for free, I will never gonna open that. Correct. Yeah. Cool.
Yep. And I think one thing I want to add there is that please don't underestimate the data aspect of B2B, right? As soon as they start using the CRM, now
It's
all
a
of their
it's a
leads
bundling
data,
effect. It's
yep,
a bundling
all of their
effect.
leads data is now in the CRM, right?
Hmm.
They will train their salespeople or their team to start using that CRM, right? All the customer interactions will be in that CRM. And whenever they, even if they want to switch to a new product, they're going to say, okay, all of this data is not transferable. Even if it is, there's going to be some friction associated with it, right? And that's the value that you build over time. The data that you end up building in your product, the experience that you end up providing to a user in your product.
And also it's a bundle effect, right? So for example, if you are giving something for free and you
Yep.
are just back end, you have a service to it attached to it, right? So again, it's a bundle effect. So again, a person will be using a CRM and also going to be using that their email automation tool or maybe some other tools, right? So yeah. Cool.
Prachi, one question over here is again, hello,
Ali, your voice is
Yeah.
very low right now, I guess.
hello,
Yeah.
yeah,
Cool.
Yeah.
yeah. Hi, hi. So Prachi, here in B2B products again, as you know, the sales cycle is little longer, right? So usually companies first demand for a POC, and after the POC is successful, then either new features are added, which would be either paid or or a longer time for a paid POC, and then means basically then they go for a pilot, and then the the decision is made, right? So in that case, what would be your advice to reduce the sales cycle, and how should someone go about it?
Right. So again, like no absolute answer for it, right? The sales cycle is actually dependent on a lot of external factors also. It depends on how big is the customer that you're trying to acquire, right? And they could have some internal approval processes as well, right? So they could maybe have like a
Right.
compliance team that looks at all the documents before they go through, right? So if you're talking of all of these different factors, then there are some factors that are out of your control, and then there are some factors that are, of course, within your control, right? Now, let's talk about the factors that are within your control. Those factors could be the onboarding cycle in itself, right? So let's say somebody starts using your product. How long does it take for them to get onboarded to your product? Is it like 1 month? Is it like 2 months, right? So that's something that you can reduce through an product built onboarding, right? Or an in-product onboarding, where you can say that you don't require any training to start using your product. We have like a built-in library of videos and emailers and help section that if your users have any questions, they will most likely find answers there. And you just need to like have one session with us where we can onboard all of your users, right? Or you can invite your users yourself and share the resources with them yourself, right? So onboarding can be one aspect of it. And then I think in product training could be the other aspect, right? So for example, you know that your product is directed towards, for example, the finance department or the legal department, right? So instead of you having to go and create training sessions or do training sessions with them, you build, in product marketing such that so you would have seen there are product walkthroughs, right? In product walkthroughs, so they say, oh, start from here, right? Now you're on step one, do this. So you have that whole in product experience built in. So you can build out those experiences to also reduce the time that it takes for you to train a certain audience.
Right. But here in case of like a data analytics platform or a
Yep.
reporting automation platform, wherein they give a subset of their data and tell you all that, okay, let's do a POC on this, and based on the insights and the analysis performed by the system, then we would be looking ahead for the this. So already the requirement is shared. Then after setting up the entire system for the customer, then they would have their team interact with it, and then later on requirements and decisions would be made, right? So in that case, it is like a mixture of both. It is also setting up the entire system for them based on their data and proving a system what analytics it can perform, plus a bit of training and onboarding. So in that
Right.
case, again, what?
Mhm. Yeah, so I would say that why is it that you're not able to identify the use cases within the demo itself, right? That is going to be my one question. Because a lot of times that we will see any reporting platform, what capabilities will it have? It will have reports built on different things, right? Different things that you can report on. And then
Exactly.
there are going to be, elements within the reports, right? That you can modify. So can you add a column? Can you delete a
Yeah.
column?
Yeah.
Can you create a customizable report, right? Now, if you
Right.
look at all of these, all of these are feature sets, right? And you can
Right.
say that, okay, we only have 5 reports, but we can build custom reports, but we charge extra for it. Or you can say the 5 reports that we have, you can't add or reduce columns. If you want to do that, we will have to build a custom report for it, right? So these are different things, right? So if you're able to replicate that behavior and show your user that, look, this is what is available within the demo
Right.
environment itself, then that's one way to also reduce the onboarding cycle, right? Now, one thing that you could be asking is that your reporting is not like, this is not like a pure reporting and analytics platform. It's like a reporting platform built on top of another platform, right? Uh, in that case, I think then it will be like a completely different use case, right? Because you're saying that somebody will use that product for a while, then they will see whether the right reports are getting pulled or not, and then they will make the decision on whether to buy a product or not, right? Now, this becomes like a very specific use case for a very specific industry and product. Of course, there are ways to tackle and reduce the onboarding cycle further, but there's like no generic answer that I can give you here, right?
Generic
Like,
answer.
yeah, it depends on the specific use case, the industry, the product.
Got it. Got it. Also, for a B2B product, as you might already be knowing, that it is little difficult to get the audience for again trials of new features, etc. Like for a B2C product, you already have your concentrated group of users. When you can easily, if you want to ship a new feature, you can get them on board. The product manager can understand what the users' expectations are, how the feature is working. right? But
Yeah.
in B2B again, if someone wants to roll out a new feature or again wants feedback from something, the loop of feedback also becomes very long, and most of the feedback you get from your internal team itself, but
Yeah.
from your end clients it becomes a little difficult. So in that case, how would you tackle that problem?
Right. So again, like there are two questions that you asked, right? Number one was that how to get feedback right around your product, and number two is how to get them to use your product in the first place.
Yeah, yeah,
So again, different aspects of virality can be there, and there can be different ways through which you can get your first set of users. One of the reasons why a lot of B2B products you will see will start from small or will target on SMBs is because those are the companies that are willing to experiment with you, right? Versus like a large corporation. A large corporation will never
yeah,
go ahead and say, okay, just implement your new product for me, right? Unless you have some sort of leverage in the
yeah,
market.
yeah,
So which is why the starting point
right,
usually is to go with smaller companies and usually with tech startup space, right? Because those are the people that are willing to, try out new things that are, because they are also creating something new, right? And they are ready to innovate and experiment. So that is usually the target market to actually start and to get like some sort of entry in the market, right? Once you have entry in the market and once you've established value, then it's easier for you to expand to whatever market horizon that you want to expand to. The number two part of getting feedback, I think, is more around, your internal champions have to be built, right? What we also did as a part of my team was that we built in a product advisory board, right? So we said that, hey, and we really got a few people from our target customer base and created a Facebook group around it and say, look, and these are people who are renowned or are known for what they do, right? And we said, look,
okay,
we have these people added to our panel, and if you have any questions, they can answer or we can also answer. But of course, you're going to trust their word more because they're from your industry, right? And they're not trying to
right,
sell anything to you. They're just telling you things from their experiences. So that trust factor comes into play, right?
right,
Initially, how we got product advisors was that we started doing webinars with them, or we started paying them some X dollars a month to just be on our advisory board, right? And as the brand grows, then there is like a two-way value, right? Then you can say that, look, you are associated with my brand, so you are also getting some value out of it, right? So again, this is one way. There can be multiple ways of getting feedback, but having internal champions really is the most helpful thing. And you will see that more often than not, people will be willing to give feedback to you because you are solving a real problem for them, right? Uh, as long as the
right,
user's problem is getting solved. So think about this, right? Tomorrow, if I come to you and say, look, I know you have this really big problem in your life and I'm willing to solve it, but for that, I want you to tell me what's not there in my product today. You'd be like happy to give 30 minutes of my time to help you understand, right, what's not there in your product today. So it's really built on that value that I
but
care
what
about you and your problem.
in this case, the user of the product would be the consumer, not the decision maker, right? Because in B2B, for purchasing you require the decision maker, but the user would be someone else, right? So here by you stating the product champions, he would be the user, not the decision maker, right?
No, it could be either, right? So think of it this way. A VP of finance could be your customer, but the finance team could be your user, right?
Right,
Now, if you think that the VP of finance is paying $10,000 for your product, and if the finance team is not able to get their bill processed, they will not go and complain to the VP of product. That doesn't happen, right? Like people are very, very
right,
vocal
right.
about their challenges and their problems.
Yes,
So either
yes,
way,
yes.
but in case, and that might be a case where you feel, that there's a friction in the that then you can always go to your champion and say, hey, can you make me talk to 2 3 people in your team to understand their challenges further.
Got it. Got it. Perfect. Understood. So basically, it's like someone from a particular company. And again, a really important point you mentioned was SMB. So if you target tech SMBs, like again, tech companies having sufficient funds also and like good amount of users, and who would be again willing to try out something what you have created, and then making internal champions over there rather
Yep.
than shooting for the enterprise level.
Yep.
Understood. Got it. Thanks.
So yes, guys, any other doubts or anything you want to ask? Cool. So guys, we are wrapping up the meeting, right? Prachi, thank you so much for such a wonderful session. I have learned so much from you. I was noting all the points and it's amazing, I guess. Guys, do you have any feedback for Prachi? Guys, if you have a feedback, please just mention on a chat box. If you like the session, please say 100%, and maybe the percentage can vary from maybe anything. But if you like the session, please mention 100%, right, on a chat box, so we can actually also see, and Prachi can also evaluate. Okay. Okay. Okay, might be the people are actually typing it. Like again, Ali is 110%. Amazing session. The way she explained things with example was wonderful. Sakshi, thank you so much. Prachi, you could see now the people are actually very happy from the kind of the session you have taken right now. It's amazing. Okay, cool. 200% Sakshi. Okay, cool. So Prachi, thank you so much for taking out time on Saturday and giving us such an insightful session. And again, we're gonna be conducting sessions in future also, right? And thank you so much, guys, for attending it. And I hope you're gonna like that, right? Perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much, Akshada. Thank you so much, Prachi. We are just wrapping up the session, and
Yes, thanks for having me.
perfect. Guys, perfect. So we are wrapping up the session. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for attending it. Cool. And also, guys, we're gonna be sharing the recording, and Prachi, I also going to share the recording with you.
Yeah, I'll just leave my LinkedIn in the
Sure.
if somebody wants to add.
Or maybe anyone, if you want to connect with Prachi, you can just text me. I can share a LinkedIn profile, right? And maybe if you Prachi, if you want, you can just
Yeah, I'll just
type
do
on a
that.
chat box. Amazing. Now you can see, Prachi, you can evaluate, right? So we use product management in a cohort as well. So we take feedbacks. Perfect, guys. If you want to connect with Prachi, you can connect on the link in chat box. And if you need any help, just let us know, right? Cool.
Thanks,
Cool.
bye.
Thank you so much, Prachi. Thank you so much. Cool, guys. Thank you so much, guys.